I wonder if we could speak here for a moment about a new consciousness born. It's already been born. I'm just wondering if you care to source it yourself, because the source of this new consciousness about which I speak is you. However, it's got one, what you might call, problem. And that problem is, in order to create a new consciousness, you need to see the flaw of the old consciousness, allow it to die, and then there is the new consciousness. There's nothing left to do. So the only important movement then is to see the insanity that you are, because you accepted the old consciousness, the consciousness that your parents presented to you. You accepted it before you realized that it was a consciousness of continuous wars, a consciousness of continuous violence, continuous raping of women, continuous of fighting, arguing. Then after you accepted this consciousness, as who was that nutcase? Shakespeare said, you then took on your role in this thing that you were born into. Another way of saying it is you were born perfect, with no dislike of other people, with no racism, with none of that stuff. And then you were taught all of those things, even subliminally taught, especially if you're white. So the only distinction between the old consciousness, the consciousness has been running this planet for thousands of years, and this new consciousness that I am, and that I am speaking from and about, is the new consciousness has no violence at its core. The old consciousness is violence at its core. So if we can take a look at, for a moment here, what violence is. Whoops. Hello, Omar. Then we can notice that this thing that I call violence, or this thing that is violence, which is the core of our being, the core of our consciousness, not our being, the core of our consciousness that we accepted after we were born, was violence. And violence is jealousy, it's anger, it's nationalism, it's greed, it's having to be right, it's control. It's all of the feelings that we invent for ourselves after we accept being insane. Once you accept the consciousness of insanity, then you have to see where you fit in this consciousness of insanity. Many people excel at it. And just consider for yourself here for a moment what the implication or the meaning is if you excel, are very successful in an insane world. What does that imply? Or what does that straight out say? Means to say that if you are extremely successful, if you are a Gates or a who's that guy that's got the shirt half away or whatever it is, or Bezos or any of the other multi-billionaires. It simply means that they are extremely successful at being insane. So this new consciousness about which I speak, not having any violence at its core, means to say it's not greedy, it has no anger, does not get jealous, does not ever have to be right. Matter of fact, it takes responsibility for its mistake, simply by saying, "Oh, my mistake, I apologize." What a huge difference. Right there is a huge difference. Because in today's consciousness, the consciousness that's been in charge of this planet for thousands of years, every generation has been becoming more ignorant, more stupid, more lost in confusion, because, watch out for this, you'll think I'm even crazier than you already think. Because we're getting smarter. That's the reason intelligence is diminishing, because the greatest deterrent to intelligence is knowledge. And in the world of this consciousness, every year, every generation, our knowledge grows. We gain knowledge. We get smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter, which means that we have more excuses, more explanations, more reasonableness for our mistakes. You see, that means that we're no longer making any mistakes. We're making excuses. We're making it reasonable. We're explaining it away. We're justifying. And every year we get better at making it reasonable and justifying and explaining it away. And the more we ignore, do not take responsibility for our mistakes, the more they repeat themselves. Just keep repeating it until you see your mistake. A new consciousness, as opposed to the old consciousness, simply notices everything that it does, everything that it thinks, and takes 100% responsibility for that. And therein lies the difference. It seems to be a small difference. But just consider what the world would be like when we... Did you notice the word when we? That's 2 words. Remove anger from our relationships, remove jealousy, remove having to be right, remove never making a mistake, remove all of the things that make us robots. Suppose that you can live in a world where we're no longer robots, where we can use words, where we can speak with one another outside of language, outside of thought, outside of knowledge, thought, and belief. That would be a world that's perfect, isn't it? Because then you couldn't, as you cannot anger me. You can't make me jealous. You can't have me in any kind of position where my feelings get hurt or some, anyway, the nonsensical things that this world is filled with. So my question here then is, are you willing to be the source of a new consciousness? Keeping in mind that this new consciousness, the only distinction now here is in the old consciousness at its core, there's violence. In the new consciousness at its core, there's nothing. Nothing is where creation intelligence lives. It lives in nothing. It doesn't have any belief about its history. It doesn't have all of that nonsensical things that cause us to repeat our lives over and over. So are you willing to source, as I said, be the source of a new consciousness? Because look, it's really important for us to realize that we can have a planet where there's no violence, where there's no wars and killings and arguing, killing, fighting, maiming, murder, rapes. However, we also need to realize that we are the source of it. There's not going to be a chariot coming in from the sky here and grab all the good people or whatever it is, or the bad people, and then, or some savior, and what do they call that? Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. There's not going to be any savior come. The savior, if you will, is you, or can be, has the possibility of being you. Because you see, if there was ever really a Jesus who's supposedly going to come back and save us, then the only consideration that he would have had is for people to start where he left off, not follow where he already... Why follow and do what's already been done? He's already done it. Why follow and do that? Start where he left off, which is create a world where there's a void where violence is now in our consciousness. And if the only distinction between the new consciousness and the old consciousness is a void where violence is, so you take the violence out of consciousness and you leave a void there, that would be a new consciousness, because the old one always invented its next move from its history. See, because knowledge, thought, and belief is all in our history. And knowledge, thought, and belief is where we have been inventing our world from for thousands of years. I'm suggesting that we create a new world. Creation comes from a void, from nothing. There's nothing there. It sees the flaw of the old. It sees the insanity of going to war and killing people and having a $750 billion savings account so we can bomb people all over the world, elect presidents who grab women between the legs and do whatever they want to do with them. And hell, 20 million women vote for him. That's why the rapes keep going on, because we vote for serial rapists, serial sexuals. At any rate, I don't want to get off on that because people get mad. They like the old boy. So if you care to have a new consciousness, or if you care to join in sourcing this new consciousness. I've been creating it, bringing it forth for 41 years now. But in a world of complete and total insanity, there's might be a few more years needed. 1 or 2, perhaps. Unless a bunch of people sourced as well. The problem here, as I said, as I sign off now, is in order to source a new consciousness, you must see your own stupidity, your own ignorance, your own insanity. That's really all it needs. However, our egos won't allow that to happen. A perfect experience of sourcing for yourself a new consciousness is sent to you. Only thing needed is for you to discover your flaw.